Hello, English learners. Welcome back to English in Minutes 2.0. I am Emma, your host for today. If you are new here, I would like to tell you that we upload a new English learning video every day on our channel to help you improve your English faster. In today's episode, you will not only improve your English listening skills, but also strengthen your speaking, vocabulary, comprehension, and sentence-building skills. In today's lesson, we are diving into an important topic that will help you communicate more naturally and confidently in English. Advanced English phrases practice in everyday real-life conversations. We will explore useful advanced phrases through natural daily life situations and practical conversation examples. You will learn how to understand these phrases in context, follow natural sentence flow, express your thoughts more clearly, and replace basic expressions with more fluent and natural English. Whether you are speaking with friends, communicating at work, solving everyday problems, sharing your opinions, making polite requests, responding to unexpected situations, or taking part in casual conversations, these advanced phrases will help you sound more confident, expressive, and natural. By the end of this video, you will understand how to use these phrases in different real-life situations, and I will share helpful practice exercises and speaking tips to help you remember them and use them correctly. Before we start the video, make sure to subscribe to the channel and press the bell icon if you want more helpful English learning episodes like this. So, grab a pen and paper, listen carefully, repeat the practice sentences, and let's get started. Let us begin with a phrase that is extremely useful when a situation is more complicated than it appears. The phrase is, "There is more to it than that." We use this expression when we want to explain that additional facts, reasons, or difficulties need to be considered. Imagine that someone says, "Working from home must be easy." You could respond, "It may look easy, but there is more to it than that. I have several deadlines, long meetings, and many responsibilities." This phrase helps you move beyond a simple explanation and introduce a deeper point. Listen carefully and repeat the complete phrase, "There is more to it than that." Now, repeat the complete example. People often think that learning English is only about memorizing words, but there is more to it than that. This sentence explains that pronunciation, listening, speaking practice, confidence, and regular exposure are also important parts of learning English. You can use this phrase during family conversations, workplace discussions, social situations, and everyday disagreements. Imagine that a friend says, "Why do you not simply move to another apartment?" A natural response would be, "There is more to it than that. I have a rental agreement, moving expenses, and my daily commute to consider." This answer sounds calm and thoughtful. It does not reject the suggestion rudely. Instead, it shows that the situation includes several important details. Listen to another complete example. Starting a business may sound exciting, but there is more to it than that. You need a clear plan, enough money, reliable customers, and the patience to handle unexpected problems. Repeat that sentence slowly, and then repeat it again at a natural speaking speed. Now, listen to a short everyday situation. A friend says, "You should accept the first job offer you receive." The other person responds, "There is more to it than that. I need to consider the salary, the working hours, the location, and the opportunities for professional growth." The friend says, "That makes sense. A job can affect many parts of your life." The other person answers, "Exactly. I want to make a careful decision instead of accepting an offer too quickly." Notice how the phrase introduces a detailed and reasonable explanation. Repeat the key response, "There is more to it than that. I need to consider the salary, the working hours, the location, and the opportunities for professional growth. Another advanced phrase that appears frequently in real-life conversations is, "That is easier said than done." We use this expression when an idea sounds simple in theory, but is difficult to carry out in reality. Imagine that someone tells you, "Just stop worrying about the future." You might respond, "That is easier said than done." You are not saying that the advice is completely wrong. You are explaining that following the advice is more difficult than giving it. Listen carefully and repeat. That is easier said than done. In natural conversation, speakers often use the contraction and say, "That's easier said than done." Repeat the complete example. Waking up at 5 every morning is easier said than done when you regularly work late at night. This phrase is useful when discussing habits, health, finances, relationships, work, and personal goals. Someone may say, "You should save half of your salary every month." A natural response would be, "That's easier said than done when you have rent, bills, transportation costs, and groceries to pay for." Someone else might say, "You should speak English without translating in your mind." A learner could respond, "That's easier said than done, but I am practicing every day." This response sounds realistic without sounding negative. It recognizes the difficulty while also showing determination. Listen to another example. Staying calm during a stressful meeting is easier said than done, although preparing in advance can make it easier. Repeat the entire sentence, paying attention to the natural rhythm of the phrase. Imagine a workplace conversation. A coworker says, "We should complete the entire project by tomorrow afternoon." The other person responds, "That's easier said than done. We are still waiting for the final numbers from the finance department." The coworker says, "Perhaps everyone can work faster." The other person replies, "We can certainly make an effort, but we also need to be realistic about the amount of work involved." The coworker then says, "You are right. We should finish the most urgent tasks first and give the manager an accurate update." This conversation demonstrates how the phrase can introduce a practical explanation without creating unnecessary conflict. Repeat the main response. "That's easier said than done. We are still waiting for the final numbers from the finance department." The next phrase is, "I see where you are coming from." This expression means that you understand another person's opinion, feelings, or reasoning, even when you do not completely agree. It is one of the most valuable phrases for polite disagreement. Imagine that a friend says, "People should never use their phones during dinner." You might respond, "I see where you're coming from, but sometimes people need to answer an urgent call or message." This phrase creates a respectful tone before you introduce a different perspective. Listen carefully and repeat, "I see where you're coming from." Now, repeat the complete sentence. "I see where you're coming from, but sometimes people need to answer an urgent call or message." This expression is especially useful in professional discussions. Suppose a manager says, "I believe everyone should work in the office 5 days a week." An employee might respond, "I see where you're coming from, especially when it comes to teamwork and communication. But remote work also helps some employees remain productive." This answer sounds mature and balanced. The employee acknowledges the manager's reasoning before presenting another viewpoint. You may also say, "I understand where you're coming from." Both forms are natural and respectful. Listen to 3 complete examples. "I see where you're coming from, but I think we need more time before making a decision." "I see where you're coming from, although my experience has been slightly different." "I completely understand where you're coming from, and I appreciate your honesty." Now, listen to a family conversation. A family member says, "I do not think you should travel right now because the trip will be expensive." The other person responds, "I see where you're coming from, and I know you are concerned about my budget. However, I have been saving for this trip for more than a year. The family member says, I did not realize that you had planned so carefully. The other person replies, Yes, I have already calculated the major expenses, and I will still have enough savings when I return. This is advanced communication because the speaker acknowledges the concern, explains the situation, and maintains a respectful tone. Repeat the key response. I see where you're coming from, and I know you are concerned about my budget. However, I have been saving for this trip for more than a year. Another useful everyday phrase is, it slipped my mind. This means that you forgot something unintentionally. Instead of always saying, I forgot, you can say, it slipped my mind. This sounds more natural and conversational. Imagine that a friend asks, Did you call the restaurant to make a reservation? You answer, I'm sorry. It completely slipped my mind. The word completely adds emphasis and shows that you genuinely forgot. Listen carefully and repeat, It slipped my mind. Now, repeat the complete response. I'm sorry. It completely slipped my mind. You can use this expression when you forget an appointment, a small task, a name, a message, or an ordinary responsibility. Listen to these examples. I meant to bring your book, but it slipped my mind. I was going to reply to your message, but it completely slipped my mind. Her birthday slipped my mind until I looked at the calendar. I intended to buy milk on my way home, but it slipped my mind. This phrase is natural, but your tone should match the seriousness of the situation. When you forget an important workplace responsibility, it is better to take responsibility and explain how you will correct the problem. You could say, I apologize. The deadline slipped my mind, but I have completed the report now, and I have created a reminder so it will not happen again. This sounds more responsible than offering an excuse. Imagine a conversation between two coworkers. One coworker asks, Did you send the updated schedule to the team? The other person answers, It slipped my mind. Thank you for reminding me. I'll send it right away. The first coworker says, No problem. Everyone needs it before the afternoon meeting. The other person responds, Understood. I'll make sure the entire team receives it within the next 10 minutes. Notice the natural sequence. The speaker admits the mistake, thanks the coworker for the reminder, and clearly states the action that will be taken. Repeat the complete response. It slipped my mind. Thank you for reminding me. I'll send it right away. The next advanced phrase is, I was under the impression that. This expression means that you believed something was true based on the information you had, although you may now realize that your understanding was incorrect. It is more polished and precise than simply saying, I thought. Imagine that you arrive late for a meeting and say, I was under the impression that the meeting started at 3. This suggests that you had a reason to believe the start time was 3, perhaps because of an email, a calendar entry, or a previous conversation. Listen carefully and repeat the complete sentence. I was under the impression that the meeting started at 3. This phrase is useful when clarifying misunderstandings without directly blaming another person. At a hotel, you might say, I was under the impression that breakfast was included in the room price. At work, you could say, I was under the impression that you had already spoken to the client. While discussing an offer, you might say, I was under the impression that the discount was available until Friday. The past form is especially common when you discover that your belief may have been wrong. Imagine that a receptionist says, Your appointment was scheduled for 10 this morning. You could respond, I'm sorry, I was under the impression that it was scheduled for 11. This response is diplomatic because it focuses on your understanding instead of accusing the receptionist of making a mistake. Now, listen to a customer service conversation. A customer says, I was under the impression that delivery was free for orders over $50. The representative responds, free delivery is available for standard shipping, but express shipping includes an additional charge. The customer says, thank you for explaining that. I did not notice that I had selected express shipping. The representative replies, no problem. I can change the order to standard delivery and remove the additional fee. This conversation shows how the phrase can help you ask for clarification politely and professionally. Repeat the customer's sentence. I was under the impression that delivery was free for orders over $50. Now, let us examine the phrase, that does not necessarily mean. We use this expression when we want to explain that one fact does not automatically prove a particular conclusion. For example, he did not answer your message, but that does not necessarily mean he is upset. He may be busy, asleep, driving, or away from his phone. This phrase helps you avoid making quick assumptions. Listen carefully and repeat. That does not necessarily mean. Now, repeat the full example. He did not answer your message, but that does not necessarily mean he is upset. This expression is useful when discussing people's behavior and uncertain situations. She was quiet during lunch, but that does not necessarily mean she was uncomfortable. The manager asked to speak with you, but that does not necessarily mean there is a problem. The restaurant is crowded, but that does not necessarily mean the service will be slow. The interview was short, but that does not necessarily mean the company was not interested. It is also useful for encouraging English learners. You made a mistake, but that does not necessarily mean your English is poor. You did not understand every word, but that does not necessarily mean you missed the main idea. These statements help us think more logically and avoid negative conclusions. Imagine that a friend says, the company has not replied to my job application, so they must have rejected me. You respond, that does not necessarily mean they rejected you. The hiring process may be taking longer than expected. Your friend says, I suppose the company could still be reviewing applications. You answer, exactly. Give them a little more time, and then send a polite follow-up email. This conversation demonstrates how the phrase can challenge a negative assumption without dismissing someone's feelings. Repeat the main response. That does not necessarily mean they rejected you. The hiring process may be taking longer than expected. Another advanced expression is, I would not go that far. We use this phrase when we believe that someone's statement is too strong, too dramatic, or exaggerated. Imagine that someone says, this is the worst restaurant in the entire city. You might respond, I wouldn't go that far. The service was slow, but the food was actually quite good. You are disagreeing, but you are doing so in a measured and respectful way. Listen carefully and repeat, I wouldn't go that far. Now, repeat the complete response. I wouldn't go that far. The service was slow, but the food was actually quite good. This phrase is useful when someone makes a dramatic claim about a person, product, event, or experience. Someone says, he is completely irresponsible. You answer, I wouldn't go that far. He made a mistake, but he usually completes his work on time. Someone says, the event was a total disaster. You respond, I wouldn't go that far. A few things went wrong, but most people still enjoyed themselves. Someone says, this phone is useless. You reply, I wouldn't go that far. The battery life is disappointing, but the camera and screen are excellent. Notice that the phrase is usually followed by a more balanced opinion. Listen to another realistic exchange. A friend says, learning advanced English is impossible. The other person responds, I wouldn't go that far. It can certainly be challenging, but regular practice makes a major difference. The friend says, sometimes I feel that I am not making any progress. The other person replies, Progress is not always easy to notice from one day to the next. However, when you compare your English over several months, the improvement becomes much clearer. This conversation replaces an extreme conclusion with a more balanced and encouraging perspective. Repeat the key response. I wouldn't go that far. It can certainly be challenging, but regular practice makes a major difference. The next expression is, it is not a big deal. This phrase means that something is not very serious, important, or difficult. Imagine that someone says, I'm sorry I arrived 5 minutes late. You answer, it's not a big deal. We haven't started yet. In this situation, the phrase reassures the person and reduces unnecessary worry. You can also use it when discussing a minor mistake. I made a small pronunciation mistake during the conversation, but it was not a big deal. Listen carefully and repeat, it's not a big deal. You may also hear, it is no big deal, or simply, no big deal. All three forms have the same general meaning. Imagine that someone says, thank you for helping me carry these bags. You respond, it was no big deal. Someone says, I'm sorry I borrowed your pen. You answer, no big deal, you can keep it. These forms sound relaxed and friendly. However, you should avoid using this phrase when someone is discussing a serious problem or something that is emotionally important to them. In that situation, saying, it's not a big deal, may sound dismissive. It is better to say, I understand why that upset you. Or, that sounds like a difficult situation. Now, listen to a realistic conversation that combines several of the phrases we have practiced. Two friends are planning a weekend trip. One friend says, we should leave early Saturday morning and book everything tonight. The other person responds, I see where you're coming from, but there is more to it than that. We still need to check everyone's schedule. The first friend says, we can simply ask everyone to decide immediately. The other person answers, that's easier said than done. Some people may need to check their work or family responsibilities. The first friend says, if they do not reply tonight, they are clearly not interested. The other person responds, that does not necessarily mean they are not interested, they may simply be busy. The first friend says, you are right. Perhaps I am making the situation sound more serious than it is. The other person answers, it's not a big deal. Let's send a clear message and give everyone until tomorrow afternoon. Listen to that conversation again in a smoother and more natural rhythm. We should leave early Saturday morning and book everything tonight. I see where you're coming from, but there is more to it than that. We still need to check everyone's schedule. We can simply ask everyone to decide immediately. That's easier said than done. Some people may need to check their work or family responsibilities. If they do not reply tonight, they are clearly not interested. That does not necessarily mean they are not interested. They may simply be busy. You are right. Perhaps I am making the situation sound more serious than it is. It's not a big deal. Let's send a clear message and give everyone until tomorrow afternoon. Advanced English is not about placing difficult words in every sentence. It is about choosing expressions that communicate your meaning clearly, politely, and precisely. Phrases such as, I see where you're coming from, and that does not necessarily mean, help you manage disagreement respectfully. Expressions such as, it slipped my mind, and I was under the impression that, help you explain mistakes and misunderstandings naturally. Phrases such as, there is more to it than that, and that's easier said than done, allow you to describe complicated situations more accurately. Let us finish this practice with complete basic and advanced sentence pairs. Listen to the basic sentence first, and then repeat the complete advanced version. The basic sentence is, I understand your opinion, but I disagree. The advanced version is, I see where you're coming from, but I look at the situation differently. Repeat it again. I see where you're coming from, but I look at the situation differently. The basic sentence is, I forgot to call him. The advanced version is, calling him completely slipped my mind. Repeat the advanced sentence. Calling him completely slipped my mind. The basic sentence is, I thought the appointment was tomorrow. The advanced version is, I was under the impression that the appointment was tomorrow. Repeat it slowly and clearly. I was under the impression that the appointment was tomorrow. The basic sentence is, your advice sounds simple, but it is difficult to follow. The advanced version is, that is easier said than done. Repeat it with a natural rhythm. That is easier said than done. The basic sentence is, one fact does not prove that conclusion. The advanced version is, that does not necessarily mean your conclusion is correct. Repeat the complete sentence. That does not necessarily mean your conclusion is correct. Now, repeat these final complete examples one more time. There is more to it than that, so we should consider every important detail before making a decision. That's easier said than done, but I am willing to make a serious effort. I see where you're coming from, although I have a different perspective. I'm sorry. Returning your call completely slipped my mind. I was under the impression that the payment was due next week. That does not necessarily mean something has gone wrong. I wouldn't go that far because the situation was not a complete failure. It's not a big deal, and the problem can be corrected quickly. Repeat each sentence at a comfortable speed, focus on the meaning, and then say it again with a smoother and more natural rhythm. Another highly useful phrase for real-life conversations is, as far as I know. We use this expression when we believe something is true based on the information available to us, but we do not want to claim complete certainty. This phrase is especially helpful when discussing schedules, plans, workplace information, travel details, or anything that may change. Imagine that a coworker asks, is the meeting still scheduled for Thursday? You could respond, as far as I know, the meeting is still scheduled for Thursday afternoon. This answer sounds more careful than simply saying, yes, because you are making it clear that you are sharing your current understanding. Listen carefully and repeat the complete phrase, as far as I know. Now, repeat the full sentence. As far as I know, the meeting is still scheduled for Thursday afternoon. You can use this phrase in many daily situations. At work, you might say, as far as I know, the manager has not approved the proposal yet. While making travel plans, you could say, as far as I know, the last train leaves at 10:30, during a family conversation. You might say, as far as I know, everyone is available for dinner on Sunday. The expression helps you sound accurate and responsible because it leaves room for new information. Listen to another example. As far as I know, the store accepts returns within 30 days. But we should check the receipt to be certain. Repeat the complete sentence slowly, and then repeat it again at a natural pace. Imagine a conversation between two coworkers. One person asks, has the client confirmed the final design? The other person replies, as far as I know, the client is still reviewing it. The first person says, should we begin preparing the next stage? The other person answers, we can prepare the materials, but I would wait for written approval before making any permanent changes. The first person responds, that sounds reasonable. I'll organize everything so we can move quickly once the approval arrives. Notice how, as far as I know, communicates useful information without presenting an uncertain fact as completely confirmed. A related phrase is, to the best of my knowledge. This expression has a similar meaning, but it sounds slightly more formal. It is often used in professional discussions, official explanations, or situations where accuracy is important. For example, to the best of my knowledge, All of the invoices have been paid. You are saying that based on everything you currently know, the statement is correct. However, you are also acknowledging that there may be information you have not seen. Listen carefully and repeat, to the best of my knowledge. Now, repeat the full example, to the best of my knowledge. All of the invoices have been paid. This phrase can be used when answering questions about records, procedures, events, or responsibilities. To the best of my knowledge, no one has reported a problem with the system. To the best of my knowledge, the documents were sent yesterday morning. To the best of my knowledge, the building will remain open during the renovations. In casual conversations, as far as I know is usually more natural. In formal or professional settings, to the best of my knowledge can sound more precise. Compare these two sentences. As far as I know, Sarah is working from home today. To the best of my knowledge, the contract has not been changed. Both are correct, but the second sounds more formal and official. The next phrase is, I will keep that in mind. This means that you will remember and consider someone's advice, information, or request in the future. It is a polite and useful response when another person gives you a suggestion. Imagine that a coworker says, the traffic is usually heavy after 5, so you may want to leave a little earlier. You could respond, thanks. I'll keep that in mind. This means you will remember the advice when making your decision. Listen carefully and repeat, I'll keep that in mind. Now, repeat the complete exchange. The traffic is usually heavy after 5. Thanks. I'll keep that in mind. This phrase is useful in personal and professional conversations. A friend may say, that restaurant becomes crowded on weekends. You answer, I'll keep that in mind when we make the reservation. A manager may say, the client prefers short and direct presentations. You respond, I'll keep that in mind while preparing the slides. A family member may say, the weather can change quickly in the mountains. You reply, I'll keep that in mind and bring an extra jacket. The phrase shows that you are listening carefully and taking the other person's information seriously. However, the tone of this expression can change depending on how it is said. When spoken warmly, it sounds appreciative and respectful. When spoken in a cold or impatient tone, it may sound like you are ending the conversation without genuinely accepting the advice. For that reason, it is often helpful to add a brief sentence showing how you will use the information, instead of only saying, I'll keep that in mind. You could say, I'll keep that in mind and check the schedule before I leave. This sounds more engaged and sincere. Now, listen to a workplace example. A manager says, when you speak with this client, avoid giving an exact completion date until the technical team confirms the schedule. The employee responds, understood. I'll keep that in mind and explain that the timeline is still being reviewed. The manager says, good. We want to be transparent without making a promise we may not be able to keep. The employee replies, that makes sense. I'll provide a general update and follow-up once the dates are confirmed. This exchange demonstrates how the phrase can show both understanding and professional responsibility. Another valuable expression is, I appreciate where you are coming from. This is similar to, I see where you're coming from, but the word appreciate adds a stronger sense of respect for the other person's concern or reasoning. Imagine that your supervisor says, I need everyone to submit the report today because the client is waiting. You might respond, I appreciate where you're coming from, but I need another hour to verify the final figures. You are showing that you recognize the importance of the supervisor's request, even though you are asking for additional time. Listen carefully and repeat, I appreciate where you're coming from. Now, repeat the complete example. I appreciate where you're coming from, but I need another hour to verify the final figures. This phrase is particularly useful in sensitive discussions. A friend may say, I think you should cancel your trip and save the money. You could respond, I appreciate where you're coming from, and I know you are trying to help. However, this trip is important to me, and I have planned my budget carefully. The expression helps protect the relationship because it recognizes the other person's intention before presenting a different decision. In professional settings, you may also say, I appreciate your concern, or I appreciate your perspective. For example, I appreciate your concern, but the team has already created a plan to manage the risk. The next phrase is, that is a fair point. We use this expression when someone says something reasonable or valid. Even if it does not completely change our opinion, it is a natural way to acknowledge another person's argument. Imagine that you say, we should choose the least expensive hotel. Your friend responds, the least expensive hotel is much farther from the city center, so we may spend more on transportation. You could say, that's a fair point. We should compare the total cost instead of only looking at the room price. Listen carefully and repeat, that's a fair point. Now, repeat the full response. That's a fair point. We should compare the total cost instead of only looking at the room price. This phrase is common during discussions and decision-making. Someone says, working from home saves commuting time, but it can also make collaboration more difficult. You respond, that's a fair point. Someone says, the new phone is expensive, but it may last longer than the cheaper model. You answer, that's a fair point. The long-term value is worth considering. The expression signals that you are willing to listen and evaluate ideas rather than defending your original opinion automatically. Imagine a family discussion about buying a new car. One person says, we should choose the larger model because it has more space. The other person responds, the larger model also uses more fuel and will cost more to maintain. The first person says, that's a fair point. We need enough space, but we should also think about the monthly expenses. The other person replies, exactly. Perhaps we can test both models and compare them carefully. This conversation sounds balanced because both speakers respond to the actual reasoning instead of repeating their original positions. A slightly stronger variation is, you have a point. This means that the other person has made a convincing or reasonable observation. For example, you have a point. Leaving earlier would give us more time in case there is traffic. In natural speech, you may also hear, you do have a point. The word do adds emphasis. You do have a point. We should not make a decision until we know the full cost. Repeat these complete sentences. You have a point. We should look at the situation more carefully. You do have a point. Waiting one more day may help us make a better decision. Another advanced phrase is, I am not entirely convinced. We use this expression when we still have doubts about an idea, explanation, product, or decision. It sounds more thoughtful and diplomatic than saying, I do not believe you, or that is wrong. Imagine that someone says, this new system will solve all of our problems. You might respond, I'm not entirely convinced. It may improve efficiency, but we still need proper training and support. Listen carefully and repeat, I'm not entirely convinced. Now, repeat the full response. I'm not entirely convinced. It may improve efficiency, but we still need proper training and support. This phrase is useful when discussing advertisements, promises, plans, and opinions. I'm not entirely convinced that the most expensive option is the best one. I'm not entirely convinced that changing the schedule will solve the problem. I'm not entirely convinced by his explanation. Notice the difference between convinced that and convinced by. We say, I'm not convinced that the plan will work. When a full statement follows, we say, I'm not convinced by the argument. When a noun follows, Both forms are natural. Imagine that a salesperson says, "This membership will save you a large amount of money." The customer responds, "I'm not entirely convinced. I would need to use the service several times a month for the membership to be worthwhile." The salesperson says, "That is true. It is most useful for frequent customers." The customer replies, "In that case, I think the standard option is more suitable for me." The customer does not reject the offer rudely. Instead, the phrase introduces a clear and reasonable concern. The next expression is, "I would rather not jump to conclusions." To jump to conclusions means to form an opinion too quickly without having enough evidence. Saying, "I would rather not jump to conclusions," shows that you want to wait for more facts before deciding what happened. Imagine that a colleague says, "The manager canceled the meeting because our project is in trouble." You could respond, "I'd rather not jump to conclusions. The meeting may have been canceled for an unrelated reason." Listen carefully and repeat. I'd rather not jump to conclusions. Now, repeat the complete example. I'd rather not jump to conclusions. The meeting may have been canceled for an unrelated reason. This phrase is useful whenever information is incomplete. A friend says, "She has not replied, so she must be angry with me." You respond, "I'd rather not jump to conclusions. She may simply be busy." A coworker says, "Sales were lower this week, so the new strategy has failed." You answer, "I'd rather not jump to conclusions based on 1 week of results." A family member says, "The car is making a strange sound, so the engine must be seriously damaged." You reply, "Let's not jump to conclusions. A mechanic should inspect it first." The phrase can also be used without "I would rather." You can say, "Let's not jump to conclusions." When speaking to a group, this sounds cooperative and practical. For example, let's not jump to conclusions until we hear both sides of the story. You may also say, "We should not jump to conclusions." Repeat these 3 versions. I'd rather not jump to conclusions. Let's not jump to conclusions. We should not jump to conclusions until we have more information. Now, listen to a realistic conversation. One coworker says, "The client has not answered our last 2 emails. I think they have chosen another company." The other person responds, "I'd rather not jump to conclusions. Their office may be closed for a holiday, or the decision may still be under review." The first coworker says, "That is possible. Should we send another message?" The other person answers, "Yes, but let's keep it polite and brief. We can ask whether they need any additional information from us." The first coworker replies, "Good idea. That will give them an opportunity to respond without making them feel pressured." Another useful phrase is "for the time being." This means for now or during the present period, although the situation may change later. Imagine that your office is being renovated. Your manager says, "For the time being, the team will work from the conference room." This arrangement is temporary. Listen carefully and repeat, "For the time being." Now, repeat the complete sentence. For the time being, the team will work from the conference room. You can use this phrase when discussing temporary plans, solutions, or conditions. For the time being, I am using my old phone. For the time being, we will continue with the current schedule. The elevator is being repaired, so we will need to use the stairs for the time being. I have not found a permanent apartment yet, so I am staying with a friend for the time being. The phrase clearly communicates that the current situation is not necessarily permanent. Compare "for the time being" with "from now on." For the time being describes a temporary arrangement. From now on describes a change that is expected to continue. For example, for the time being, meetings will be held online means the arrangement may change later. From now on all reports must be submitted electronically, suggests a permanent new rule. Listen to both examples again and notice the difference in meaning. Imagine that a family's washing machine stops working. One person says, "The repair company cannot come until Friday." The other person responds, "For the time being, we can use the laundromat near the grocery store." The first person says, "That should work. I'll take the clothes there tomorrow morning." The other person answers, "Once the machine is repaired, we can return to our normal routine." This is a simple but natural example of describing a temporary solution. The next phrase is, "It is only a matter of time." We use this expression when we believe something will definitely or very probably happen eventually. Imagine that someone is practicing English consistently but still feels nervous. You might say, "Keep practicing. It is only a matter of time before you become more confident." This means that confidence is expected to develop with continued practice. Listen carefully and repeat. It's only a matter of time. Now, repeat the complete sentence. It's only a matter of time before you become more confident. This phrase can describe positive or negative developments. With the company growing so quickly, it is only a matter of time before they need a larger office. The road is becoming more crowded every year, so it is only a matter of time before the city changes the traffic system. He has been working extremely hard, and it is only a matter of time before someone notices his effort. The phrase often uses before, followed by the expected event. Be careful with the tone because this expression can sound very certain. You should use it when you genuinely believe the result is highly likely. For example, "It is only a matter of time before this old computer stops working," suggests that the computer will almost certainly fail soon. In a supportive context, you might say, "You are improving every week. It is only a matter of time before speaking English feels more natural." Now, listen to a conversation between two friends. One friend says, "I have been applying for jobs for several weeks, but I have not received an offer." The other person responds, "You have strong experience, and you are preparing carefully for every interview. It is only a matter of time before the right opportunity appears." The first friend says, "I hope so. The waiting is becoming frustrating." The other person replies, "I understand, but each interview is also helping you improve. Keep learning from the experience and continue applying." The phrase offers encouragement while recognizing that progress may take time. Another advanced expression is, "I cannot help but think." This means that a thought or feeling keeps coming to your mind, even when you may not want it to. Imagine that a friend is planning to buy an extremely expensive car despite having financial difficulties. You might say, "I can't help but think that this is not the right time for such a large purchase." Listen carefully and repeat. "I can't help but think." Now, repeat the complete sentence. "I can't help but think that this is not the right time for such a large purchase." This phrase can express concern, curiosity, doubt, or reflection. I can't help but think that we are missing an important detail. I can't help but wonder whether the schedule is realistic. I can't help but feel that she was disappointed by the decision. Notice that after cannot help but, we use the base form of the verb. We say, "I can't help but think," not, "I can't help but thinking." You may also hear, "I can't help thinking," without the word but. Both structures are correct. I can't help thinking that something is wrong. I can't help but think that something is wrong. Imagine a conversation about a new apartment. One person says, "The apartment looks beautiful, and the rent is surprisingly low." The other person responds, "I can't help but wonder why it has remained available for so long." The first person says, "Perhaps the location is less convenient than it appears." The other person replies, "That may be true. We should visit the neighborhood at different times of the day before making a decision. The expression introduces a concern without making a direct accusation. The next phrase is, I am leaning toward. We use this when we are beginning to prefer one option, although the final decision has not yet been made. Imagine that you are choosing between two apartments. You might say, I'm leaning toward the second apartment because it is closer to work. This means the second apartment is currently your preferred choice, but you are still considering the options. Listen carefully and repeat. I'm leaning toward. Now, repeat the full example. I'm leaning toward the second apartment because it is closer to work. This phrase is extremely useful during decision-making. I'm leaning toward taking the earlier flight. I'm leaning toward staying home this weekend. I'm leaning toward the less expensive option. At the moment. I'm leaning toward accepting the offer. You can also use leaning against when you are becoming less favorable toward something, although this is less common in everyday speech. For example, I'm leaning against buying the car because the maintenance costs are too high. Imagine that two friends are choosing a restaurant. One person says, the Italian restaurant has excellent reviews, but it is quite expensive. The other person responds, the Thai restaurant is more affordable and closer to the theater. The first person says, I'm leaning toward the Thai restaurant. It seems more convenient, and we will have more time before the movie. The other person replies, I agree. Let's make a reservation so we do not have to wait. The phrase allows the speaker to express a preference without making the decision sound final too early. Another strong phrase for decision-making is, I have mixed feelings about it. This means that you have both positive and negative feelings about something. Imagine that your company introduces a new work schedule. You might say, I have mixed feelings about it. I like finishing earlier. But starting work at 7 will be difficult. Listen carefully and repeat, I have mixed feelings about it. Now, repeat the complete example. I have mixed feelings about it. I like finishing earlier, but starting work at 7 will be difficult. This expression is useful when discussing changes, relationships, purchases, moves, and life decisions. I have mixed feelings about moving to another city. I am excited about the opportunity, but I will miss my family. I have mixed feelings about the new restaurant. The food was excellent, but the service was disappointing. I have mixed feelings about working from home. I enjoy the flexibility, but I miss speaking with my coworkers in person. The phrase helps you express a balanced emotional response instead of describing something as simply good or bad. Now, listen to a conversation about a promotion. One person says, you must be excited about becoming the new department manager. The other person responds, I am excited, but I also have mixed feelings about it. The position is a great opportunity, although it comes with much more responsibility. The first person says, that is understandable. A major change can feel exciting and stressful at the same time. The other person replies, exactly. I am proud of the promotion, but I know I will need time to adjust. This is a realistic way to discuss complex emotions. The next phrase is, it remains to be seen. We use this expression when the result of a situation is still unknown and will become clear later. Imagine that a company launches a new product. Someone says, the product looks promising, but it remains to be seen whether customers will buy it. Listen carefully and repeat. It remains to be seen. Now, repeat the complete sentence. The product looks promising, but it remains to be seen whether customers will buy it. This phrase sounds slightly formal, but it is common in thoughtful discussions. It remains to be seen whether the new schedule will improve productivity. The team has made several changes, but it remains to be seen whether they will solve the problem. The restaurant has received a lot of attention, although it remains to be seen whether it can maintain its quality. The expression is useful when you want to avoid making a prediction before enough evidence is available. Imagine a discussion about a new public transportation route. One person says, "The new bus route should reduce traffic in the city center." The other person responds, "It may help, but it remains to be seen how many people will actually use it." The first person says, "That is true. The route will only succeed if it is reliable and convenient." The other person replies, "We should have a clearer picture after the first few months." This conversation shows how the phrase keeps the discussion realistic and evidence-based. Now, let us combine several of these expressions in one natural situation. Imagine that two coworkers are discussing a proposed change to their work schedule. One person says, "As far as I know, management wants the new schedule to begin next month." The other person responds, "I have mixed feelings about it. The shorter afternoons sound appealing, but arriving earlier may be difficult for employees with long commutes." The first person says, "That's a fair point. I'm leaning towards supporting the proposal, although I would like to see more details." The other person replies, "I'm not entirely convinced that one schedule will work well for everyone." The first person says, "I appreciate where you're coming from. Perhaps the company could offer 2 different starting times." The other person responds, "That may be a better solution, but it remains to be seen whether management will consider it." Listen to the same exchange again with attention to the key phrases. "As far as I know, management wants the new schedule to begin next month. I have mixed feelings about it." "That's a fair point. I'm leaning towards supporting the proposal. I'm not entirely convinced that one schedule will work well for everyone. I appreciate where you're coming from. It remains to be seen whether management will consider it." These expressions help the speakers discuss an uncertain and potentially sensitive issue with precision and respect. Let us continue with complete basic and advanced sentence pairs. The basic sentence is, "I think this information is correct." The advanced version is, "As far as I know, this information is correct." Repeat the advanced version. "As far as I know, this information is correct." The basic sentence is, "I will remember your advice." The advanced version is, "I'll keep that in mind." Repeat it again. "I'll keep that in mind." The basic sentence is, "What you said is reasonable." The advanced version is, "That's a fair point." Repeat the complete phrase, "That's a fair point." The basic sentence is, "I still have doubts." The advanced version is, "I'm not entirely convinced." Repeat it slowly and naturally. "I'm not entirely convinced." The basic sentence is, "We should not decide too quickly." The advanced version is, "We should not jump to conclusions." Repeat the advanced sentence. "We should not jump to conclusions." The basic sentence is, "This arrangement is temporary." The advanced version is, "We will use this arrangement for the time being." Repeat it again. "We will use this arrangement for the time being." The basic sentence is, "This will probably happen eventually." The advanced version is, "It is only a matter of time before it happens." Repeat the complete sentence. "It is only a matter of time before it happens." The basic sentence is, "I am starting to prefer the first choice." The advanced version is, "I'm leaning toward the first option." Repeat it clearly. "I'm leaning toward the first option." The basic sentence is, "I feel both positive and negative about the change." The advanced version is, "I have mixed feelings about the change." Repeat it again. "I have mixed feelings about the change." The basic sentence is, "We do not know the result yet." The advanced version is, "It remains to be seen what the result will be." Repeat the full sentence. "It remains to be seen what the result will be." Now, Repeat these complete phrases in realistic sentences. As far as I know, the appointment has not been canceled. To the best of my knowledge, every required document has been submitted. Thank you for the advice. I'll keep that in mind. That's a fair point, and we should consider it before making a decision. I'm not entirely convinced that the new plan will save money. I'd rather not jump to conclusions until we receive the full report. For the time being, we will continue using the current system. It is only a matter of time before your consistent practice produces stronger results. I can't help but think that we have overlooked something important. I'm leaning toward accepting the second offer. I have mixed feelings about moving away from my hometown. The plan sounds promising, but it remains to be seen whether it will work in practice. Repeat each sentence with a calm and natural rhythm. Focus on the complete thought rather than individual words. These phrases are especially valuable because they help you express uncertainty, respect, caution, preference, and balanced opinions. They allow you to communicate like a thoughtful speaker who understands that real-life situations are often complex. When you use expressions such as, "That's a fair point," "I'm not entirely convinced," and "it remains to be seen," your English becomes more precise without becoming unnatural or unnecessarily formal. Another highly useful phrase for everyday real-life conversations is, "that being said." We use this expression when we want to introduce a contrast, limitation, or different perspective after making a statement. It is similar to saying, "however," but it often sounds more natural in spoken English. Imagine that someone says, "Working from home gives me more flexibility. That being said, I sometimes miss speaking with my coworkers in person." The first sentence presents a positive point, while the second adds a different side of the situation. Listen carefully and repeat, "that being said." Now, repeat the complete example. "Working from home gives me more flexibility. That being said, I sometimes miss speaking with my coworkers in person." This phrase is useful when you want to sound balanced rather than completely positive or completely negative. You might say, "The hotel was comfortable and conveniently located. That being said, the room was smaller than I expected." You could also say, "The new software has several useful features. That being said, it will take the team some time to learn how to use it properly." In both examples, the speaker acknowledges one side before introducing another important point. The phrase allows the conversation to move naturally without making the contrast sound too sharp. Imagine two friends discussing a restaurant. One person says, "The food was fresh and the staff was very friendly." The other person responds, "That sounds like a good experience." The first person continues, "It was. That being said, the prices were much higher than I expected." The other person says, "In that case, it may be better for a special occasion than an ordinary dinner." The first person replies, "I agree. I would go back, but I probably would not visit every week." Notice how "that being said" introduces a criticism without canceling the positive comments that came before it. A closely related phrase is, "having said that." It has almost the same meaning. You might say, "The commute is long. Having said that, the job offers excellent opportunities for growth." Both "that being said" and "having said that" are natural. "That being said" is extremely common in American English, while "having said that" may sound slightly more formal in some situations. Repeat these complete examples. "The apartment is expensive. That being said, the location is excellent. The work is challenging. Having said that, I am learning a great deal." The next phrase is, "when it comes down to it." We use this expression when we want to identify the most important fact, decision, or issue after considering many details. It is similar to saying, "In the end, or when everything is considered. Imagine that two people are discussing several job offers. One person says, "The first job pays more, and the second job is closer to home." The other person responds, "When it comes down to it, you need to decide which factor matters most to you." Listen carefully and repeat. When it comes down to it. Now, repeat the complete sentence. When it comes down to it, you need to decide which factor matters most to you. This phrase is helpful when a discussion becomes complicated. We can compare prices, features, and reviews. But when it comes down to it, we need a phone that is reliable. There are several ways to improve your English. But when it comes down to it, ideas are the beginning points of all fortunes. The meeting included many different opinions. But when it came down to it, everyone agreed that the customer needed a faster response. Notice that the phrase can be used in the present or past. We say, "When it comes down to it," for a present or general situation, and "when it came down to it," for a past situation. Imagine a couple deciding whether to move. One person says, "The new city has more job opportunities, but our current neighborhood is familiar and comfortable." The other person responds, "We also need to consider the cost of housing and the distance from our families." The first person says, "That is true. When it comes down to it, we need to decide what kind of life we want over the next few years." The other person replies, "Exactly. The decision is not only about money, it is also about our priorities." The phrase helps the speakers move from many details to the central issue. Another useful expression is, "at the end of the day." This phrase also means that after considering everything, one fact remains most important. It is common in casual and professional speech, although it should not be repeated too often. Imagine that someone says, "We can discuss different marketing ideas for hours, but at the end of the day, customers need to understand the value of the product." Listen carefully and repeat, "at the end of the day." Now, repeat the entire sentence. At the end of the day, customers need to understand the value of the product. This expression can be used when discussing personal choices. Other people can offer advice, but at the end of the day, the decision is yours. It can also be used when talking about work. We may prefer different methods, but at the end of the day, we all want the project to succeed. In daily life, you might say, "The apartment is not perfect, but at the end of the day, it is safe, affordable, and close to work." The phrase directs attention toward the most important result. Listen to a short conversation. A friend says, "Everyone has a different opinion about what I should study." The other person responds, "Advice can be useful, but at the end of the day, you are the one who will spend years working in that field." The friend says, "That is exactly why the decision feels so difficult." The other person replies, "Take your time, research the options carefully, and choose the path that fits your abilities and goals." This exchange shows how the phrase can help someone focus on personal responsibility. The next advanced phrase is, "I would take that with a grain of salt." We use this expression when we believe that information may not be completely accurate, reliable, or objective. It does not mean that the information is definitely false. It means we should be cautious about believing it fully. Imagine that a friend says, "Someone online claims that this course will make you fluent in English in 7 days." You could respond, "I would take that claim with a grain of salt." Listen carefully and repeat, "I would take that with a grain of salt." Now, repeat the complete example. I would take that claim with a grain of salt because language learning requires time and consistent practice. This phrase is useful when discussing rumors, advertisements, online reviews, predictions, and personal opinions. He says the company will double everyone's salary next month. But I would take that with a grain of salt. Some online reviews may be exaggerated, so take them with a grain of salt. The salesperson promised that the product would solve every problem, but I took that statement with a grain of salt. The phrase can be used in the present as a command, or in the past. Imagine that two coworkers are discussing an office rumor. One person says, "I heard that the company is planning to close this department." The other person responds, "Where did you hear that?" The first person says, "Someone mentioned it in the break room." The other person replies, "I would take that with a grain of salt." Until management makes an official announcement, we should not assume that the rumor is true. The first person says, "You are right. It is better to wait for reliable information." This conversation combines caution with a reasonable explanation. Another helpful phrase is, "There is no harm in." We use this expression when an action is safe, reasonable, or worth trying, even if it may not be necessary. Imagine that you are unsure whether a restaurant requires reservations. A friend says, "There is no harm in calling ahead." This means calling is unlikely to cause a problem and may be useful. Listen carefully and repeat. There is no harm in. Now, repeat the full example. There is no harm in calling ahead to make sure a table is available. This phrase is valuable when giving gentle advice. There is no harm in asking for clarification. There is no harm in bringing an extra jacket. There is no harm in comparing prices before making a purchase. There is no harm in sending a polite follow-up message. It often encourages someone to take a small, sensible action. The phrase sounds less forceful than saying, "You must do this." It presents the suggestion as practical and low risk. Imagine that a friend is preparing for a job interview. The friend says, "I have reviewed the company website, but I am not sure whether I need to practice my answers again." You respond, "There is no harm in practicing one more time, especially if it helps you feel more confident." The friend says, "I suppose another practice session could help me organize my thoughts." You answer, "Exactly. You do not need to memorize every sentence, but you should be able to explain your experience clearly." This exchange uses the phrase to offer supportive advice without creating pressure. A similar phrase is, "It cannot hurt to." For example, "It cannot hurt to check the address before leaving." This does not mean physical pain. It means the action is unlikely to create a problem and may be beneficial. You could say, "It cannot hurt to ask whether a discount is available." You might also say, "It cannot hurt to keep a copy of the document." Repeat the two forms. There is no harm in checking. It cannot hurt to check. The next phrase is, "It is worth a shot." We use this expression when something may succeed and is worth trying, even though the result is uncertain. Imagine that a store has a strict return policy, but your product stopped working after the deadline. A friend might say, "You can still contact customer service. It is worth a shot." Listen carefully and repeat, "It's worth a shot." Now, repeat the complete sentence. You can still contact customer service. It's worth a shot. This phrase is common when discussing opportunities, applications, requests, and possible solutions. The position requires more experience than I have, but applying is worth a shot. The restaurant may be fully booked, but calling them is worth a shot. I do not know whether the manager will approve the request, but it is worth a shot. The phrase does not promise success. It simply suggests that the possible benefit justifies the effort. Imagine that someone wants to reconnect with an old friend. The person says, "We have not spoken in years, and I am not sure whether I should send a message." The other person responds, "If the friendship was important to you, reaching out may be worth a shot." The first person says, "I worry that the message may feel awkward." The other person replies, "Keep it simple and sincere." You can say that you were thinking about them and wanted to see how they were doing. The phrase encourages action while respecting the uncertainty. Another useful expression is, "It is a long shot." This means that something is unlikely to succeed, although it is not impossible. Imagine that you arrive at a fully booked hotel without a reservation. You might say, "Finding an available room tonight is a long shot, but we can ask." Listen carefully and repeat, "It's a long shot." Now, repeat the complete example. Finding an available room tonight is a long shot, but we can ask. Compare, "It is worth a shot" with, "It is a long shot." "It is worth a shot" focuses on the idea that trying is worthwhile. "It is a long shot" focuses on the low probability of success. Both phrases may appear in the same sentence. Getting tickets at the last minute is a long shot, but checking the website is worth a shot. Repeat that sentence. Getting tickets at the last minute is a long shot, but checking the website is worth a shot. Imagine a workplace situation. An employee says, "The deadline is tomorrow, but perhaps we can ask the client for an extension." A coworker responds, "It may be a long shot because they already confirmed the schedule." The employee says, "That is true, but it is worth a shot if we explain the technical problem honestly." The coworker replies, "Agreed, we should contact them immediately and offer a realistic new date." This exchange demonstrates the difference between recognizing a low chance of success and still deciding to try. The next phrase is, "I do not want to make a big deal out of it." We use this expression when we do not want to treat a small problem as extremely serious or draw too much attention to it. Imagine that someone receives the wrong drink at a cafe. The person says, "I do not want to make a big deal out of it. But I ordered tea, not coffee." Listen carefully and repeat. "I don't want to make a big deal out of it." Now, repeat the complete sentence. "I don't want to make a big deal out of it. But I ordered tea, not coffee." This phrase can make a complaint sound calmer, especially when the mistake is minor. "I don't want to make a big deal out of it, but the bill includes an item we did not order." "I don't want to make a big deal out of it, but the music is making it difficult to hear the conversation." "I don't want to make a big deal out of it, but I would appreciate it if you returned the book this week." The phrase shows that you are trying to resolve the situation without unnecessary conflict. However, this expression should not be used to minimize a serious issue. If the problem involves safety, discrimination, financial loss, or repeated unacceptable behavior, it may be necessary to speak clearly and directly. The phrase is more appropriate for small misunderstandings and manageable inconveniences. Advanced communication includes knowing when to soften a statement and when to state a concern firmly. Listen to a customer service conversation. A customer says, "I don't want to make a big deal out of it, but I was charged twice for the same item." The representative responds, "I am sorry about that. Let me review the receipt." The customer says, "Thank you. I understand that mistakes happen." The representative replies, "You are correct. The item appears twice, so I will remove the additional charge immediately." The phrase allows the customer to remain polite while still addressing the problem clearly. Another valuable expression is, "That is beside the point." We use this when someone introduces information that does not address the main issue being discussed. Imagine that a coworker says, "I know the report was late, but the design looks excellent." You might respond, "The design may be excellent, but that is beside the point. The client needed the report yesterday." Listen carefully and repeat, "That is beside the point." Now, repeat the complete response. "The design may be excellent, but that is beside the point. The client needed the report yesterday." This phrase can sound direct, so tone is important. In a sensitive conversation, A softer version may be better. You could say, I understand that, but I do not think it addresses the main issue. You could also say, that may be true, but the main concern is the missed deadline. These alternatives communicate the same idea more gently. That is beside the point, is useful when a discussion is moving away from the central issue, but it should be used respectfully. Imagine a family conversation. One person says, "You forgot to lock the front door last night." The other person responds, "Nothing happened, so everything is fine." The first person says, "That is beside the point. We need to lock the door because it is an important safety habit." The other person replies, "You are right. I will check it carefully before going to bed tonight." In this example, the fact that nothing happened does not remove the importance of the original concern. The next expression is, "That is not the point I am trying to make." We use this when another person misunderstands our main message. It sounds less confrontational than simply saying, "You are wrong." Imagine that you say, "We should reduce unnecessary spending." Someone responds, "We cannot stop buying groceries." You could say, "That is not the point I'm trying to make. I am talking about expenses we can avoid, not basic needs." Listen carefully and repeat. That is not the point I'm trying to make. Now, repeat the complete example. That is not the point I'm trying to make. I am talking about expenses we can avoid, not basic needs. This phrase is extremely useful in discussions where people are speaking about related but different ideas. That is not the point I'm trying to make. I am not saying the plan is bad. I am saying it needs more preparation. That is not the point I'm trying to make. I understand that the job pays well, but I am concerned about the working conditions. That is not the point I'm trying to make. I am not criticizing your decision. I am asking how it will affect the schedule. The phrase creates an opportunity to restate your message more clearly. Another advanced phrase is, "for what it is worth." We use this expression before offering an opinion, comment, or piece of information that may or may not be helpful. It can make advice sound modest rather than overly confident. Imagine that a friend is choosing between two job offers. You might say, "For what it's worth, I think the second offer provides better long-term opportunities." Listen carefully and repeat, "for what it's worth." Now, repeat the complete sentence. For what it's worth, I think the second offer provides better long-term opportunities. This phrase is useful when you want to contribute without pretending that your view is the final answer. For what it's worth, I had a positive experience with that company. For what it's worth, the earlier train is usually less crowded. For what it's worth, I think you handled the situation professionally. Sometimes it is used to offer reassurance. For what it's worth, I do not think you embarrassed yourself. Most people probably did not notice the mistake. Imagine that someone is worried about a presentation. The person says, "I paused several times, and I think everyone could tell that I was nervous." A friend responds, "For what it's worth, I thought you looked calm and well prepared." The person says, "Really? I felt extremely nervous." The friend replies, "That feeling was not obvious from the audience. Your explanation was clear, and you answered the questions well." The phrase makes the compliment sound sincere and thoughtful. The next expression is, "I would not rule it out." To rule something out means to decide that it is impossible, unsuitable, or no longer worth considering. Saying, "I would not rule it out," means you are still willing to consider the possibility. Imagine that someone asks, "Would you ever move to another country?" You might respond, "I would not rule it out," especially if the right opportunity appeared. Listen carefully and repeat, "I wouldn't rule it out." Now, repeat the complete example, "I wouldn't rule it out," especially if the right opportunity appeared. This phrase is useful when discussing future plans, choices, and uncertain possibilities. I would not rule out working remotely in the future. We should not rule out the possibility of changing suppliers. The doctor has not ruled out an allergy. In everyday conversation, you might say, I am not planning to buy a house this year, but I would not rule it out if prices became more affordable. Imagine two friends talking about a vacation. One person says, I thought you wanted to stay close to home this year. The other person responds, that is still my preference, but I would not rule out traveling abroad if we found an affordable package. The first person says, in that case, we can compare both local and international options. The other person replies, that sounds sensible, we do not need to decide immediately. The phrase keeps a possibility open without expressing a firm commitment. Another useful phrase is, I am open to the idea. This means that you are willing to consider a suggestion, even if you have not accepted it yet. Imagine that a coworker says, perhaps we should hold shorter meetings twice a week instead of one long meeting. You could respond, I'm open to the idea, but I would like to know how it would affect everyone's schedule. Listen carefully and repeat, I'm open to the idea. Now, repeat the complete example. I'm open to the idea, but I would like to know how it would affect everyone's schedule. This phrase sounds cooperative and flexible. I'm open to trying a different approach. I'm open to changing the plan if we find a better option. I'm open to the idea of moving, although I need more time to think about it. It is especially useful in teamwork because it shows that you are not rejecting a suggestion automatically. Now, listen to a natural conversation that combines several of these expressions. Two friends are discussing whether to attend an expensive weekend event. One person says, the tickets cost more than I expected. That being said, the event includes several activities. The other person responds, for what it's worth, I heard that last year's event was well organized, but I would take online comments with a grain of salt. The first person says, that is a fair point. Getting discounted tickets may be a long shot, but asking the organizer is worth a shot. The other person replies, there is no harm in asking. I am open to the idea of going, but I do not want to make a final decision until we know the full cost. The first person says, when it comes down to it, we need to decide whether the experience is worth the money. The other person answers, exactly. I would not rule it out, but I want to compare it with a few other options first. Let us continue with complete basic and advanced sentence pairs. The basic sentence is, however, there is another side. The advanced version is, that being said, there is another side to consider. Repeat the advanced sentence. That being said, there is another side to consider. The basic sentence is, the most important thing is reliability. The advanced version is, when it comes down to it, reliability is the most important thing. Repeat it again. When it comes down to it, reliability is the most important thing. The basic sentence is, do not believe that information completely. The advanced version is, take that information with a grain of salt. Repeat the complete sentence. Take that information with a grain of salt. The basic sentence is, trying will not cause a problem. The advanced version is, there is no harm in trying. Repeat it naturally. There is no harm in trying. The basic sentence is, trying may be useful. The advanced version is, it is worth a shot. Repeat the phrase, it is worth a shot. The basic sentence is, success is unlikely. The advanced version is, it is a long shot. Repeat it clearly. It is a long shot. The basic sentence is, I do not want to exaggerate this problem. The advanced version is, I do not want to make a big deal out of it. Repeat the complete sentence. I do not want to make a big deal out of it. The basic sentence is, that information is not related to the main issue. The advanced version is, that is beside the point. Repeat it again, that is beside the point. The basic sentence is, you misunderstood my main message. The advanced version is, that is not the point I am trying to make. Repeat it slowly and clearly. That is not the point I am trying to make. The basic sentence is, my opinion may not matter, but here it is. The advanced version is, for what it is worth, I think the plan is reasonable. Repeat the entire sentence. For what it is worth, I think the plan is reasonable. The basic sentence is, I am still willing to consider it. The advanced version is, I would not rule it out. Repeat the phrase, I would not rule it out. Now, repeat these final complete examples with a smooth and confident rhythm. The salary is attractive. That being said, the working hours may be difficult. When it comes down to it, we need a solution that everyone can follow. At the end of the day, the final decision belongs to you. I would take that rumor with a grain of salt until we receive official information. There is no harm in asking for a clearer explanation. The request may be rejected, but it is still worth a shot. Getting a reservation tonight is a long shot because the restaurant is usually full. I do not want to make a big deal out of it, but I would appreciate a correction. The price is beside the point because we are discussing safety. That is not the point I am trying to make. I am concerned about the timing, not the idea itself. For what it is worth, I think you made a thoughtful decision. I would not rule out changing the plan if new information becomes available. I am open to the idea, but I need more time to consider the details. These phrases help you express contrast, caution, possibility, disagreement, and openness in a more natural and precise way. They are especially useful because they allow you to manage real conversations without sounding overly direct. Instead of rejecting an idea immediately, you can say, I am open to the idea, or I would not rule it out. Instead of believing uncertain information, you can say, I would take that with a grain of salt. Instead of exaggerating a small concern, you can say, I do not want to make a big deal out of it. Practicing these complete expressions in realistic contexts will help you use them more confidently in everyday English. Another advanced phrase that can make your everyday English sound more natural is, I am not in a position to. We use this expression when we are unable to do something because we lack the authority, information, time, money, or appropriate circumstances. It sounds more professional and thoughtful than simply saying, I cannot. Imagine that a coworker asks, can you approve this expense today? You might respond, I'm not in a position to approve it because the department manager needs to review it first. Listen carefully and repeat, I'm not in a position to approve it. Now, repeat the complete sentence. I'm not in a position to approve it because the department manager needs to review it first. This phrase is useful in professional conversations when you need to explain a limitation clearly. I'm not in a position to confirm the delivery date until I speak with the supplier. I'm not in a position to discuss the confidential details of the agreement. I'm not in a position to make that decision on behalf of the entire team. Each sentence communicates that the speaker has a genuine limitation rather than a lack of interest. The phrase can also be used in personal situations. You might say, I'm not in a position to lend money at the moment. Or, I'm not in a position to move to another city this year. These responses sound direct but respectful. Imagine a customer asking a service representative for a full refund. The customer says, can you return the entire payment today? The representative responds, I'm not in a position to authorize a full refund, but I can refer the request to my supervisor. The customer says, how long will the review take? The representative replies, You should receive an answer within 2 business days. Notice that the representative does not stop after explaining the limitation. The speaker also offers a useful next step. This is an important communication habit. When you cannot do something, explain what you can do instead. A related phrase is, "It is beyond my control." We use this when a situation is affected by forces or decisions that we cannot personally manage. Imagine that a flight is delayed because of severe weather. An airline employee might say, "I understand your frustration, but the weather conditions are beyond our control." Listen carefully and repeat, "It is beyond my control." Now, repeat the complete sentence. The delay is caused by severe weather, which is beyond our control. This phrase is common when discussing weather, regulations, technical failures, company policies, and other external circumstances. The final decision is beyond my control. The increase in shipping costs is beyond our control. The road closure was beyond anyone's control. However, this phrase should not be used to avoid responsibility when the situation could have been managed. It is most appropriate when the speaker genuinely has no authority or influence over the problem. Imagine that 2 friends are discussing an outdoor event. One person says, "I am disappointed that the event was canceled." The other person responds, "I am disappointed too, but the storm was beyond the organizer's control." The first person says, "I understand, safety had to come first." The other person replies, "Exactly. They are planning to reschedule the event next month." The phrase helps explain the cause without blaming people unfairly. The next useful expression is, "I am afraid that is not an option." This is a polite but firm way to say that something cannot be accepted or considered. Imagine that a hotel guest asks to stay in a room after the hotel is fully booked for the next night. The receptionist might say, "I'm afraid extending your stay is not an option because the room has already been reserved." Listen carefully and repeat, "I'm afraid that is not an option." Now, repeat the full sentence. "I'm afraid extending your stay is not an option because the room has already been reserved." In this phrase, "I'm afraid" does not mean that the speaker feels fear. It is used to soften disappointing or negative information. You might hear, "I'm afraid we cannot offer a refund after 30 days. I'm afraid changing the deadline is not an option. I'm afraid that table is no longer available." These sentences sound more polite than a short and direct refusal. Imagine a workplace conversation. An employee says, "Could we submit the report next week instead?" The manager responds, "I'm afraid that is not an option because the client needs it before Friday's meeting." The employee says, "In that case, I will need help completing the financial section." The manager replies, "That is reasonable. I'll ask another team member to assist you this afternoon." The manager remains firm about the deadline while still helping the employee find a practical solution. Another valuable phrase is, "I would prefer to keep my options open." This means that you do not want to make a final decision yet because you may want to consider other possibilities. Imagine that someone asks whether you will accept a job offer immediately. You could say, "I would prefer to keep my options open until I hear back from the other company." Listen carefully and repeat, "I'd prefer to keep my options open." Now, repeat the complete sentence. "I'd prefer to keep my options open until I hear back from the other company." This phrase is useful when discussing work, travel, purchases, relationships, and future plans. I would prefer to keep my options open before booking the trip. We should keep our options open until we know the final cost. She is keeping her options open and speaking with several employers. It suggests caution and flexibility rather than indecision. Imagine that 2 friends are planning a vacation. One person says, "Should we reserve the hotel today?" The other person responds, "I would prefer to keep our options open for another day, because a few other hotels may offer better rates. The first person says, I understand, but we do not want the current price to increase. The other person replies, that is true. Let's choose a reservation that allows free cancellation. This solution allows them to make progress while preserving flexibility. The next phrase is, I am willing to meet you halfway. We use this expression when two people disagree but one person is prepared to compromise. To meet someone halfway means that both sides make a reasonable adjustment. Imagine that one roommate wants the apartment very warm and the other wants it cool. One person might say, I prefer a lower temperature, but I'm willing to meet you halfway. Listen carefully and repeat. I'm willing to meet you halfway. Now, repeat the complete example. I prefer a lower temperature, but I'm willing to meet you halfway. And adjust it slightly. This phrase is very useful in negotiations and everyday disagreements. I cannot accept the full price, but I'm willing to meet you halfway. I would prefer to leave earlier, but I'm willing to meet you halfway and leave at noon. The team wants 2 extra weeks, while the client wants the work tomorrow. We need to find a way to meet halfway. The phrase shows cooperation and a desire to solve the problem fairly. Imagine 2 coworkers discussing a schedule. One person says, I need the report by Wednesday. The other person responds, Wednesday will be difficult because I am waiting for information from another department. The first person says, could you send the completed sections on Wednesday and the final section on Thursday? The other person replies, yes, I'm willing to meet you halfway. I can send most of the report on Wednesday morning and finish the remaining section the next day. The speakers avoid an argument by finding a practical compromise. A related expression is, let us find some middle ground. Middle ground means a solution that does not completely satisfy either side but is acceptable to both. Imagine that 2 family members disagree about where to eat. One wants an expensive restaurant, and the other wants to cook at home. Someone might say, let's find some middle ground and choose an affordable restaurant nearby. Listen carefully and repeat, let's find some middle ground. Now, repeat the complete sentence. Let's find some middle ground and choose an affordable restaurant nearby. This expression works well in workplace discussions. The client wants a faster schedule, and the team needs more time. We need to find some middle ground. It can also be used in personal relationships. We have different ideas about the weekend, but I'm sure we can find some middle ground. The phrase encourages collaboration rather than competition. The next advanced expression is, I would not hold my breath. We use this when we believe something is unlikely to happen soon, or possibly unlikely to happen at all. Imagine that someone says, perhaps the company will reduce everyone's working hours next week. You might respond, I wouldn't hold my breath. This means you do not expect the change to happen. Listen carefully and repeat. I wouldn't hold my breath. Now, repeat the complete example. They may promise a quick decision, but I wouldn't hold my breath. This phrase is usually informal and can sound slightly skeptical. He said he would clean the garage today, but I wouldn't hold my breath. The store may lower the price, but I wouldn't hold my breath. She has promised to arrive on time, although I'm not holding my breath. The last example means the speaker does not strongly expect the promise to be kept. Because the phrase can sound sarcastic, you should use it carefully. It is more appropriate with friends or in relaxed conversations than in formal professional communication. In a business setting, you might use a softer phrase such as, I would not rely on that happening soon, or, I think we should prepare for a longer wait. Imagine 2 friends discussing a delayed repair. One person says, the repair company says the part may arrive tomorrow. The other person responds, that would be helpful, but I wouldn't hold my breath. They have already changed the delivery date twice. The first person says, "Then we should make another plan for the weekend." The other person replies, "Agreed. If the part arrives, that will be a pleasant surprise." The phrase communicates doubt based on previous experience. Another useful phrase is, "I do not want to get my hopes up." This means that you do not want to become too excited about a positive result that is still uncertain. Imagine that you completed a strong job interview but have not received an offer. You might say, "The interview went well, but I don't want to get my hopes up." Listen carefully and repeat. I don't want to get my hopes up. Now, repeat the full sentence. The interview went well, but I don't want to get my hopes up until I receive an official offer. This phrase can be used when waiting for results, approval, news, or opportunities. The apartment may become available. But I don't want to get my hopes up. The doctor said the results look encouraging, although we do not want to get our hopes up too soon. There is a chance that we will receive tickets, but I'm trying not to get my hopes up. The phrase allows you to express cautious optimism. Imagine two coworkers discussing a possible promotion. One person says, "The manager praised your work and invited you to a private meeting." The other person responds, "That sounds encouraging, but I don't want to get my hopes up. The meeting could be about something else." The first person says, "That is true, but your recent performance has been excellent." The other person replies, "Thank you. I'll stay positive, but I'll wait for the official conversation." This is a balanced way to handle uncertainty. The next expression is, "I am trying to make the most of it." We use this when a situation is not ideal, but we are making an effort to enjoy it or gain something useful from it. Imagine that someone has to stay home during a vacation because of bad weather. The person might say, "The weather is disappointing, but we're trying to make the most of it." Listen carefully and repeat. We're trying to make the most of it. Now, repeat the complete sentence. The weather is disappointing, but we're trying to make the most of it by cooking together and watching movies. This phrase is useful when discussing delays, changes, difficult circumstances, and unexpected situations. The office renovation is inconvenient, but we are making the most of the temporary workspace. My flight was delayed, so I made the most of the extra time by reading and finishing some work. The apartment is small, but we have made the most of the available space. It reflects a practical and positive attitude without pretending that the problem does not exist. Imagine that a friend moves to a new city and feels lonely. The friend says, "I still miss my old neighborhood and friends." You respond, "That is understandable. How are you adjusting?" The friend says, "I am trying to make the most of it. I joined a local exercise class and started exploring different areas on weekends." You answer, "That sounds like a good approach. It may take time, but those activities can help the city feel more familiar." The phrase communicates effort and resilience. Another advanced phrase is, "I have a lot on my plate." This means that you have many responsibilities, tasks, or problems to manage. Imagine that a coworker asks you to join another project. You might say, "I would like to help, but I have a lot on my plate this week." Listen carefully and repeat, "I have a lot on my plate." Now, repeat the complete sentence. I would like to help, but I have a lot on my plate this week. This phrase is common in professional and personal conversations. She has a lot on her plate with work, school, and family responsibilities. I cannot plan a vacation right now because I already have too much on my plate. The manager has a lot on his plate, so it may take him a few days to respond. The expression does not refer to food. It describes a heavy workload or several demanding responsibilities. Imagine that a friend asks, "Why have you been so quiet lately?" You respond, "I have had a lot on my plate. Work has been extremely busy, and I am also helping my family move." The friend says, "That sounds exhausting. Is there anything I can do?" You answer, "Thank you. I may need help carrying a few boxes this weekend." The phrase gives a natural explanation without listing every small detail at the beginning. A related expression is, "I am stretched too thin." This means that you are trying to handle too many responsibilities and cannot give enough time or energy to each one. Imagine that you are working on several projects, studying at night, and helping with family responsibilities. You might say, "I have been feeling stretched too thin lately." Listen carefully and repeat, "I'm stretched too thin." Now, repeat the complete sentence. "I'm stretched too thin, so I need to reduce some of my commitments." The phrase often suggests that the situation is becoming unhealthy or ineffective. The team is stretched too thin and needs additional support. She agreed to too many responsibilities and is now stretched too thin. I do not want to take on another project because I am already stretched too thin. It is stronger than saying, "I am busy." It communicates that your time and energy have been divided among too many demands. Imagine a conversation between an employee and a manager. The employee says, "I want to maintain the quality of my work, but I am becoming stretched too thin." The manager asks, "Which responsibilities are creating the most pressure?" The employee responds, "The 2 client projects require most of my attention, and the additional administrative work is making it difficult to meet the deadlines." The manager says, "Let's review your workload and move some of the administrative tasks to another team member." This conversation shows how the phrase can communicate a serious workload problem professionally. The next phrase is, "I need to take a step back." We use this when we need to pause, create distance, or look at a situation more calmly and objectively. Imagine that you have been working on a difficult problem for several hours. You might say, "I need to take a step back and look at this with a fresh perspective." Listen carefully and repeat, "I need to take a step back." Now, repeat the complete sentence. "I need to take a step back and look at this with a fresh perspective." This expression can describe a mental pause, a reduced level of involvement, or a temporary break. We should take a step back and review the original goal. I decided to take a step back from social media for a few weeks. The discussion is becoming emotional, so let's take a step back and return to it later. The phrase is useful because it suggests a thoughtful pause rather than giving up. Imagine that 2 coworkers disagree about a project. One person says, "We have been discussing the same issue for an hour, and we are not making progress." The other person responds, "You are right. We may need to take a step back and identify the main problem." The first person says, "Let's review the customer's original request before deciding on the technical details." The other person replies, "That should help us focus on what actually matters." The phrase helps redirect an unproductive conversation. Another valuable expression is, "Let us put things into perspective." We use this when we want to consider a problem in a broader and more balanced way. Imagine that someone makes one small mistake during a successful presentation and feels embarrassed. You might say, "Let's put things into perspective. You spoke for 30 minutes, answered every question, and made only one minor mistake." Listen carefully and repeat, "Let's put things into perspective." Now, repeat the complete example. Let's put things into perspective. One small mistake does not erase everything you did well. This phrase is useful when people are worried, disappointed, or focused too heavily on one negative detail. Let's put the cost into perspective. The more reliable product is slightly more expensive, but it may last several years longer. We should put the delay into perspective. The project is only 1 day behind schedule, and most of the work is complete. When you put things into perspective, the situation is manageable. The phrase encourages rational and balanced thinking. Imagine a learner saying, "I forgot several words during my English conversation, So the entire conversation was a failure. You could respond, let's put things into perspective. You spoke for 10 minutes, explained your ideas, and continued communicating even when you forgot a word. That is progress. The learner says, I suppose I am focusing too much on the mistakes. You answer, exactly. Mistakes show you what to practice, but they do not define your overall ability. This is an important mindset for language learning. The next expression is, that is easier to justify. We use this when one decision, expense, or action has a stronger reason behind it than another. Imagine that someone is deciding between buying a fashionable item and replacing a broken work computer. You might say, replacing the computer is easier to justify because you need it for your job. Listen carefully and repeat. That is easier to justify. Now, repeat the complete example. The higher cost is easier to justify if the product is safer and more reliable. This phrase is useful when discussing budgets, business decisions, purchases, and priorities. The additional expense is easier to justify if it reduces long-term maintenance costs. Hiring another employee is easier to justify when the team is consistently overwhelmed. The change would be easier to justify if we had clear evidence that it would improve performance. It helps explain why one choice is more reasonable. Imagine a couple discussing home repairs. One person says, we could buy new furniture, or we could replace the old heating system. Ice. The other person responds, the heating system is more expensive, but the expense is easier to justify because the current system is unreliable. The first person says, that is true. The furniture can wait, but the heating system is essential. The conversation becomes clearer when the speakers focus on necessity and long-term value. Now, listen to a natural conversation that combines several phrases with me. An employee says, I have a lot on my plate, binningow, and I am starting to feel stretched too thin. The manager responds, I appreciate your honesty. Which responsibilities are causing the greatest difficulty? The employee says, the new client account requires most of my time, but I am also managing several smaller projects. The manager replies, I am not in a position to remove the client account, but I can transfer 2 smaller projects to another employee. The employee says, I'm willing to meet you halfway. I can keep 1 smaller project if someone else handles the weekly reporting. The manager responds, that sounds reasonable. Let's find some middle ground and review the arrangement again next week. The employee says, thank you. I think taking a step back and reorganizing the workload will help me maintain the quality of my work. Listen to another combined conversation. 2 friends are waiting for the results of a housing application. One person says, the landlord told us that our application looks strong. The other person responds, that sounds positive, but I don't want to get my hopes up until the agreement is confirmed. The first person says, I understand. I would prefer to keep our options open and continue looking at other apartments. The other person replies, that makes sense. I would not rule out this apartment, but we should not depend on it completely. The first person says, exactly. The final decision is beyond our control, so we should focus on what we can do. This conversation demonstrates cautious optimism and practical decision-making. Let us continue with complete basic and advanced sentence pairs. The basic sentence is, I do not have the authority to approve this. The advanced version is, I'm not in a position to approve this. Repeat the advanced sentence. I'm not in a position to approve this. The basic sentence is, I cannot control the final decision. The advanced version is, the final decision is beyond my control. Repeat it clearly. The final decision is beyond my control. The basic sentence is, that choice is not possible. The advanced version is, I'm afraid that is not an option. Repeat the phrase, I'm afraid that is not an option. The basic sentence is, I do not want to decide yet. The advanced version is, I would prefer to keep my options open. Repeat the complete sentence. I would prefer to keep my options open. The basic sentence is, I am willing to compromise. The advanced version is, I'm willing to meet you halfway. Repeat it again. I'm willing to meet you halfway. The basic sentence is, we should find a compromise. The advanced version is, let's find some middle ground. Repeat it naturally. Let's find some middle ground. The basic sentence is, I do not expect that to happen soon. The advanced version is, I wouldn't hold my breath. Repeat the phrase, I wouldn't hold my breath. The basic sentence is, I do not want to become too excited yet. The advanced version is, I don't want to get my hopes up. Repeat it slowly. I don't want to get my hopes up. The basic sentence is, I am trying to use the situation positively. The advanced version is, I'm trying to make the most of it. Repeat the complete sentence. I'm trying to make the most of it. The basic sentence is, I have many responsibilities. The advanced version is, I have a lot on my plate. Repeat it again. I have a lot on my plate. The basic sentence is, I am managing too many responsibilities. The advanced version is, I'm stretched too thin. Repeat it clearly. I'm stretched too thin. The basic sentence is, I need to pause and reconsider the situation. The advanced version is, I need to take a step back. Repeat the phrase, I need to take a step back. The basic sentence is, we should consider the situation more realistically. The advanced version is, let's put things into perspective. Repeat the complete sentence. Let's put things into perspective. Now, repeat these final complete examples with a calm and natural rhythm. I'm not in a position to confirm the schedule until the client responds. The final result is beyond my control, so I am focusing on the work I can complete. I'm afraid changing the reservation is not an option at this stage. I would prefer to keep my options open until I receive all the information. I'm willing to meet you halfway, if we can agree on a realistic deadline. Let's find some middle ground instead of arguing over the two extreme choices. They may promise a quick response, but I wouldn't hold my breath. The conversation went well, but I don't want to get my hopes up before the official decision. The situation is not ideal, but I am trying to make the most of it. I have a lot on my plate, so I need to organize my priorities carefully. I have been stretched too thin, and I need to reduce some of my responsibilities. Let's take a step back and look at the problem from another perspective. Let's put things into perspective. One difficult day does not mean the entire week has been unsuccessful. These expressions are valuable because they help you manage limitations, uncertainty, pressure, compromise, and disappointment in a mature and natural way. They allow you to say no politely, explain your workload clearly, remain realistic about uncertain outcomes, and search for reasonable solutions when people disagree. The goal is not to use every phrase in a single conversation. The goal is to recognize the right expression for the situation and use it with a calm, respectful, and confident tone. Another advanced phrase that is extremely useful in everyday conversations is, I do not take that for granted. We use this expression when we recognize that something valuable, helpful, or positive should not be treated as automatic or unimportant. Imagine that someone says, your family always supports your decisions. You might respond, yes, and I do not take that for granted. This means you understand that their support is valuable and that not everyone has the same experience. Listen carefully and repeat, I do not take that for granted. Now, repeat the complete sentence. My family has always supported me, and I do not take that for granted. This phrase can be used when discussing relationships, opportunities, health, work, or daily comforts. I have a flexible work schedule, and I do not take that for granted. My friend always makes time to listen, and I never take that for granted. We have access to clean water every day, but many people do not, so we should not take it for granted. The phrase often communicates gratitude and maturity. It reminds us that even ordinary parts of life may be valuable. Imagine a conversation between two coworkers. One person says, "Your manager seems very supportive." The other person responds, "She is. She gives me honest feedback and allows me to learn from mistakes." I do not take that for granted. The first person says, "That kind of leadership can make a major difference." The other person replies, "Absolutely. It helps me feel more confident and responsible." The phrase allows the speaker to express appreciation naturally. A related expression is, "It means a lot to me." We use this when someone's action, words, or support feels emotionally important. Imagine that a friend helps you during a difficult week. You might say, "Thank you for checking on me. It means a lot to me." Listen carefully and repeat, "It means a lot to me." Now, repeat the complete sentence. "Your support means a lot to me, especially during such a stressful time." This expression is useful when thanking someone sincerely. "Your kind message meant a lot to me. It means a lot to me that you remembered my birthday." "Your confidence in my work means a lot to me." Notice that the phrase can be used in the present or past. We say, "It means a lot to me," for something that matters now, and "It meant a lot to me," when referring to a past action. Imagine that a learner says to a friend, "You always encourage me to speak English, even when I make mistakes." The friend responds, "Of course, you are improving every day." The learner says, "Thank you. That means a lot to me because I used to feel very embarrassed when speaking." The friend replies, "You should be proud of your progress." This exchange shows how the phrase can communicate sincere gratitude. The next advanced expression is, "I can relate to that." We use this when another person describes an experience, thought, or feeling that we have also experienced. Imagine that someone says, "I sometimes understand English perfectly when reading, but I struggle to speak quickly." You could respond, "I can relate to that." Speaking often requires a different kind of practice. Listen carefully and repeat, "I can relate to that." Now, repeat the complete response, "I can relate to that because I had the same difficulty when I was learning." This phrase helps create a connection between speakers. I can relate to feeling nervous before a presentation. I can relate to what you are saying about working from home. Many people can relate to the pressure of balancing work and family responsibilities. It shows empathy because you are not only listening to the person, you are connecting their experience with your own. Imagine a conversation between two friends. One says, "I feel tired even after a full night of sleep because my mind keeps thinking about work." The other responds, "I can relate to that. Stress can make it difficult to feel completely rested." The first friend says, "I am trying to stop checking my email late at night." The other replies, "That helped me as well." Creating a clear end to the workday made a noticeable difference. The phrase opens the door to supportive advice based on shared experience. Another useful expression is, "I know the feeling." It has a similar meaning but sounds more casual. If someone says, "I spent the entire morning looking for my keys," you might respond, "I know the feeling. I misplaced my wallet last week." If someone says, "I was extremely nervous before the interview," you could say, "I know the feeling. Interviews can be stressful even when you are well prepared." Repeat the complete phrase, "I know the feeling." The next phrase is, "I could not agree more." We use this when we strongly agree with someone. It may sound as though it contains a negative idea because of the word not, but the meaning is completely positive. It means that your agreement is already as strong as possible. Imagine that someone says, "Regular practice is more effective than studying for several hours only once a month." You could respond, "I couldn't agree more." Listen carefully and repeat, "I couldn't agree more." Now, repeat the complete exchange. Consistency is essential when learning a language. I couldn't agree more. This phrase is more expressive than simply saying, "I agree." It works well in discussions about values, work, learning, and everyday opinions. Good communication is essential in a healthy relationship. I couldn't agree more. Employees perform better when expectations are clear. I couldn't agree more. People should think carefully before sharing information online. I couldn't agree more. Imagine two coworkers discussing customer service. One says, "Customers may forget small mistakes, but they remember how they were treated." The other person responds, "I couldn't agree more." A respectful response can sometimes be more important than the original problem. The first person says, "Exactly. People want to feel heard and taken seriously." This phrase communicates strong agreement naturally and efficiently. A slightly less intense expression is, "You are absolutely right." For example, "You are absolutely right. We should confirm the details before making a promise." You can also say, "That is exactly how I see it." Listen to the complete sentence. "That is exactly how I see it. And I think the entire team would benefit from the change." These expressions allow you to vary the way you show agreement. The next advanced phrase is, "I see your point." We use this when we understand the logic of another person's argument, even if we are not fully persuaded. Imagine that you say, "We should buy the cheapest computer." Another person responds, "A cheaper model may need to be replaced much sooner." You could say, "I see your point. Paying more now may save money later." Listen carefully and repeat, "I see your point." Now, repeat the complete response. "I see your point. Paying more now may save money later." This phrase can be used in both casual and professional discussions. I see your point. But we also need to consider the deadline. I see your point, and I agree that we need more information. I see your point, although I am still concerned about the cost. It acknowledges the reasoning without pretending that all doubts have disappeared. Imagine a discussion about remote work. One person says, "Employees save time when they do not have to commute." The other person responds, "That is true, but some people communicate more effectively in person." The first person says, "I see your point. Perhaps a flexible schedule would give employees the benefits of both arrangements." The other person replies, "That would be a reasonable compromise." The phrase helps the conversation move toward a solution. Another valuable phrase is, "That is a valid concern." We use this when someone raises a reasonable worry or risk. Imagine that a team is considering a new computer system. One employee says, "The system may be faster, but everyone will need training." The manager responds, "That is a valid concern. We should include training time in the schedule." Listen carefully and repeat, "That is a valid concern." Now repeat the complete sentence. That is a valid concern, and we should address it before moving forward. This phrase is useful because it shows respect for another person's worry without automatically rejecting the plan. The cost is a valid concern. That is a valid concern, but there may be ways to reduce the risk. Your concern about privacy is completely valid. It encourages people to discuss problems openly rather than hiding them. Imagine that a family is planning a long road trip. One person says, "I am worried that the car may not be reliable enough for such a long drive." The other responds, "That is a valid concern. We should have it inspected before making the trip." The first person says, "If the mechanic finds a serious problem, we can rent another vehicle." The other person replies, "Agreed. It is better to check now than deal with a breakdown later. The phrase leads directly to a practical solution. The next expression is, I understand your hesitation. We use this when someone is uncertain or reluctant to make a decision. Imagine that a friend receives a job offer in another city but is unsure about moving. You might say, I understand your hesitation. Relocating would affect your work, home, and relationships. Listen carefully and repeat. I understand your hesitation. Now, repeat the complete sentence. I understand your hesitation because this is a major decision. This phrase sounds supportive because it does not pressure the person to decide immediately. I understand your hesitation, but gathering more information may help. I understand your hesitation about signing a long contract. I completely understand why you are hesitant. You may use hesitation as a noun or hesitant as an adjective. Imagine that someone is considering taking an advanced English course. The person says, the course looks useful, but I am worried that it may be too difficult. A friend responds, I understand your hesitation. However, the course includes support sessions, and you can review the lessons at your own pace. The person says, that makes it feel more manageable. The friend replies, you can also speak with the instructor before enrolling. The phrase acknowledges the concern before offering helpful information. Another useful phrase is, there is no need to rush into anything. We use this when someone has time to think and should avoid making a decision too quickly. Imagine that a salesperson pressures your friend to buy something immediately. You might say, there is no need to rush into anything. You can compare other options first. Listen carefully and repeat. There is no need to rush into anything. Now, repeat the complete sentence. There is no need to rush into anything, because the decision deserves careful thought. This phrase is helpful when discussing large purchases, relationships, contracts, jobs, and major life choices. There is no need to rush into accepting the offer. You do not need to rush into a decision before you understand the conditions. Let's not rush into anything until we have reviewed the details. It encourages calm and thoughtful decision-making. Imagine that a person is considering renting an apartment. The landlord says another applicant is interested and asks for an immediate deposit. The person tells a friend, I feel pressured to decide tonight. The friend responds, there is no need to rush into anything. Read the contract carefully and make sure the apartment truly meets your needs. The person says, I do not want to lose the opportunity. The friend replies, that is understandable, but making a poor decision quickly could cost much more later. The phrase helps protect the person from unnecessary pressure. The next advanced expression is, I need some time to process this. We use this when we have received important, surprising, emotional, or complicated information and need time to understand it fully. Imagine that your manager offers you a promotion with major new responsibilities. You might say, thank you for the opportunity. I need some time to process this before giving you a final answer. Listen carefully and repeat. I need some time to process this. Now, repeat the complete response. I appreciate the offer, but I need some time to process this before making a decision. This phrase is useful in both personal and professional situations. That is a lot of information, and I need some time to process it. I was surprised by the news, so I needed a few days to process everything. Please do not expect an immediate answer because I am still processing what happened. The phrase communicates that you are taking the situation seriously rather than ignoring it. Imagine that two family members are discussing an unexpected move. One person says, the company wants me to transfer to another city within 2 months. The other responds, that is a major change. I need some time to process this. The first person says, of course, We do not need to make every decision tonight. The other person replies, Thank you. I want to consider the practical details as well as how we both feel about it. This conversation demonstrates patience and mutual respect. Another helpful phrase is, let me think it over. This means that you want to consider something carefully before deciding. It is common when responding to offers, invitations, requests, and suggestions. Imagine that someone asks, Would you like to join our weekend project? You could say, Let me think it over and check my schedule. Listen carefully and repeat, Let me think it over. Now, repeat the complete sentence. Let me think it over and give you an answer tomorrow. To think something over means to consider its advantages, disadvantages, and possible consequences. I need to think the offer over. Let me think it over before I commit. She thought it over carefully and decided to accept. This phrase sounds natural and responsible because it shows that you do not want to make a careless decision. The next expression is, I have come to realize that. We use this when our understanding has gradually changed over time. Imagine that someone says, I used to believe that speaking perfectly was necessary, but I have come to realize that communication matters more than perfection. Listen carefully and repeat. I have come to realize that. I repeat the complete sentence. I have come to realize that confidence grows through practice, not through waiting for the perfect moment. This phrase is useful when discussing lessons, personal growth, relationships, and changing opinions. I have come to realize that rest is an important part of productivity. I have come to realize that I cannot please everyone. Over time, I came to realize that the job was not right for me. Notice that we use have come to realize when the understanding is connected to the present, and came to realize when describing a completed change in the past. Imagine that a person says, I spent years comparing my progress with other people. A friend asks, Do you still do that? The person responds, Not as much. I have come to realize that everyone learns at a different pace. The friend says, That is an important lesson. The person replies, Yes. Focusing on my own improvement has made the process much more enjoyable. The phrase introduces a meaningful conclusion based on experience. Another advanced expression is, It has made a world of difference. We use this when something has created a very large and positive change. Imagine that an English learner begins practicing for 15 minutes every day. After several months, the learner says, Daily speaking practice has made a world of difference. Listen carefully and repeat. It has made a world of difference. Now, repeat the complete sentence. Practicing consistently has made a world of difference in my confidence. This phrase can describe changes in comfort, performance, health, work, or relationships. The new schedule has made a world of difference. Having a supportive manager made a world of difference in my first year. A few small changes to the room made a world of difference. It emphasizes that the improvement was significant, not minor. Imagine that someone says, You sound much more confident when you speak English now. The learner responds, Thank you. Recording my voice and listening to it regularly has made a world of difference. The other person says, What did you notice from the recordings? The learner replies, I became more aware of my pacing, pronunciation, and repeated mistakes. The phrase clearly communicates the strength of the improvement. The next useful expression is, I am beginning to get the hang of it. To get the hang of something means to begin understanding how to do it successfully. Imagine that you are learning to use new software. At first, it feels confusing, but after several days, you might say, I'm beginning to get the hang of it. Listen carefully and repeat. I'm beginning to get the hang of it. Now, repeat the complete sentence. The system seemed complicated at first, but I'm beginning to get the hang of it. This phrase is common when learning skills, routines, tools, or procedures. I am finally getting the hang of driving in heavy traffic. It took me a few weeks to get the hang of the new schedule. Once you get the hang of it, the process becomes much faster. It communicates progress without suggesting complete mastery. Imagine an English learner saying, "Natural conversations still move quickly, but I am beginning to get the hang of listening for key phrases." A teacher responds, "That is excellent progress. You do not need to understand every word." The learner says, "I am also noticing how speakers connect words together." The teacher replies, "That awareness will make listening easier over time." This exchange shows the phrase in a realistic learning context. Another useful expression is, "It is starting to pay off." We use this when effort, patience, or an investment begins producing positive results. Imagine that someone has been exercising regularly for several months. The person says, "The early mornings were difficult, but the effort is starting to pay off." Listen carefully and repeat, "It is starting to pay off." Now, repeat the complete sentence. My daily practice is starting to pay off because I can express myself more easily. This phrase can refer to work, study, savings, relationships, and long-term plans. All of your preparation is paying off. The company's investment in training is beginning to pay off. Her patience paid off when she finally received the right opportunity. The phrase often encourages people to continue because their effort is producing visible progress. Now, listen to a final natural conversation that combines several expressions with me. One friend says, "You seem much more comfortable speaking English than you did last year." The learner responds, "Thank you. Daily practice has made a world of difference, and I am finally getting the hang of speaking without translating every sentence." The friend says, "Your hard work is clearly paying off." The learner replies, "I have come to realize that progress depends more on consistency than perfection." The friend says, "I couldn't agree more. Small efforts become powerful when you repeat them regularly." The learner responds, "Your encouragement has also meant a lot to me, and I do not take it for granted." Listen to another complete exchange. One person says, "I received a job offer today, but the position would require me to move." The other responds, "I understand your hesitation. There is no need to rush into anything." The first person says, "I appreciate that. I need some time to process the offer and consider how it would affect my family." The other person replies, "That makes sense. Think it over carefully, review the details, and make the decision that is right for your situation." The first person says, "Exactly. I do not want fear to control my choice, but I also do not want to ignore the practical concerns." Let us finish this practice with complete basic and advanced sentence pairs. The basic sentence is, "I am grateful for this." The advanced version is, "I do not take this for granted." Repeat the advanced sentence. "I do not take this for granted." The basic sentence is, "Your support is very important to me." The advanced version is, "Your support means a lot to me." Repeat it naturally. "Your support means a lot to me." The basic sentence is, "I have experienced something similar." The advanced version is, "I can relate to that." Repeat the phrase, "I can relate to that." The basic sentence is, "I strongly agree." The advanced version is, "I couldn't agree more." Repeat it clearly. "I couldn't agree more." The basic sentence is, "I understand your argument." The advanced version is, "I see your point." Repeat the phrase, "I see your point." The basic sentence is, "Your worry is reasonable." The advanced version is, "That is a valid concern." Repeat the complete sentence. "That is a valid concern." The basic sentence is, I understand why you are uncertain. The advanced version is, I understand your hesitation. Repeat it again. I understand your hesitation. The basic sentence is, you do not need to decide quickly. The advanced version is, there is no need to rush into anything. Repeat the full sentence. There is no need to rush into anything. The basic sentence is, I need time to understand this information. The advanced version is, I need some time to process this. Repeat it slowly. I need some time to process this. The basic sentence is, I will consider it carefully. The advanced version is, let me think it over. Repeat the phrase, let me think it over. The basic sentence is, my understanding has changed over time. The advanced version is, I have come to realize that my original assumption was wrong. Repeat the complete sentence. I have come to realize that my original assumption was wrong. The basic sentence is, this has created a major improvement. The advanced version is, this has made a world of difference. Repeat it clearly. This has made a world of difference. The basic sentence is, I am beginning to understand how to do it. The advanced version is, I am beginning to get the hang of it. Repeat the complete phrase. I am beginning to get the hang of it. The basic sentence is, my effort is producing results. The advanced version is, my effort is starting to pay off. Repeat it naturally. My effort is starting to pay off. Now, repeat these final complete examples with a steady and confident rhythm. I have supportive people in my life, and I do not take that for granted. Thank you for believing in me. It means a lot to me. I can relate to feeling nervous when speaking in an unfamiliar situation. I couldn't agree more that regular practice is essential. I see your point, and I will consider the issue more carefully. That is a valid concern, and we should discuss a practical solution. I understand your hesitation because the decision involves several risks. There is no need to rush into anything before you understand the full agreement. I need some time to process this before giving a final response. Let me think it over and speak with my family. I have come to realize that mistakes are a necessary part of learning. Daily listening practice has made a world of difference in my comprehension. I am beginning to get the hang of following natural conversations. My consistent effort is finally starting to pay off. These expressions bring greater depth, accuracy, and emotional intelligence to everyday English. They help you show gratitude, empathy, agreement, concern, caution, reflection, and progress. When you practice them as complete thoughts and connect them with realistic situations, they become easier to remember and use naturally. Fluency does not develop from memorizing complicated language without context. It grows when you understand how a phrase works, hear it repeatedly, say it clearly, and recognize the moments when it can express your meaning more effectively. Thank you so much for staying with me until the end of this lesson. Today, you practiced a wide range of advanced English phrases that can help you communicate more clearly, naturally, and confidently in everyday real-life conversations. Remember, you do not need to memorize every phrase at once. Choose a few expressions that feel useful to you, listen to them again, repeat the complete sentences, and gradually begin using them in your daily conversations. The more often you hear and practice these phrases in meaningful situations, the more naturally they will become part of your active English. Keep practicing consistently, speak without being afraid of mistakes, and focus on expressing your ideas clearly. Every small effort you make is helping you become a stronger and more confident English speaker. If you found this lesson helpful, please like the video, subscribe to English in Minutes 2.0, and press the bell icon so you never miss our upcoming English learning videos. You can also share this lesson with a friend who wants to improve their advanced English speaking skills. Thank you again for learning with me today. I am Emma, and I look forward to practicing English with you again in our next lesson. Keep listening, keep speaking, and keep improving. Have a wonderful day.